Is the next wave of the housing crash in Phoenix about to hit? The data, it's suggesting that the market in Phoenix is hitting another leg of this downturn. So you need to be very careful as a buyer and investor. Because home prices in Phoenix, despite their correction over the last 2 years, they're still 22% overvalued from their long-term norms. With this 22% overvaluation being the highest since back in the last crash, before prices in Phoenix went down 50%. And so there's lots of downsides still in this market. The correction is not over. And one reason we know that the housing correction in Phoenix is not over is because right now, as we speak, the inventory of homes for sale is absolutely spiking. We are seeing a monumental surge in the number of new listings hitting the market combined with a big reduction in buyers. With the inventory of homes for sale in Phoenix spiking all the way up to 15,000 homes in April 2024, a figure which is almost triple what it was 2 years ago and is now at the highest rate since 2019. However, I believe these inventory levels in Phoenix are going to continue to spike into the future because we're seeing all types of issues crop up for this market. The buyer demand, it's way down. Meanwhile, we're seeing lots of investors and Airbnb owners, they're trying to sell at the worst possible moment. Something that's leading to some pretty crazy price reductions in Phoenix, everyone. Take a look at this listing here. It's on the west side of the metro in Surprise. The owner just did a $35,000 price cut, which is an 8% reduction after having the house on the market for 1 day. You can see here, yeah, this house, it's not maybe the greatest. It could use a couple updates. I wouldn't be surprised if the prices go down by more. Similar situation going on in this listing, everyone. It's a $350,000 house, 3-bed, 2-bath. Looks nicer on the inside, more recently updated, but take a look at this, everyone. Oh boy. This house was actually purchased by an investor in July 2022 for $370,000, and now less than 2 years later, they're selling at a $20,000 loss at $350,000. You can see before they had it for sale, they were trying to rent it a couple months ago. They couldn't rent it. And so who's the owner on this house in El Mirage? Oh, well, it's an LLC called Pathway Home Buyer LLC. They're located in Dallas at 2121 North Pearl Street. Let's see if I type that address in, 2121 North Pearl Street, Dallas. You can see this owner, Pathway Homes, they were a rent-to-own startup. Basically they bought houses, tried to rent them, tried to give the renters the possibility to own it down the line. Well, it looks like they are liquidating. And so you got to be very careful if you're in Phoenix with these investors starting to liquidate, because a lot of investors bought in Phoenix over the last 3 or 4 years. Lots of investors bought at sky high prices. And so the fact that these investors are now going from buying to selling, this is something that can completely flip the market. Remember, folks, this is a market in Phoenix where there's already a correction taking place. Prices have already dropped 6% in the Phoenix metro. If we break it out by county, the decline was almost 10% in Pinal County, 5.7% in Maricopa County from the peak in 2022. And if we look at data on Reventure app, you can actually see the zip code level decline in home prices in Phoenix from peak in 2022. So, if you're someone in Phoenix trying to understand the trends in your market, look and see if you can identify in your zip code how much prices have dropped. You can actually see in Paradise Valley, which is one of the most expensive parts of Phoenix, prices haven't dropped at all. There's been no correction in Paradise Valley. However, if you go out west, out to Surprise and Sun City and Goodyear and Avondale, and then you go down southeast to Suntan Valley, these are where the bigger corrections have taken place. And one area that I'm starting to get concerned about, everyone, in Phoenix is Mesa. Take a look at this. In Mesa, the inventory of homes for sale was only 18 last year. Now it's 48 in this zip code. So when you see this type of massive inventory spike going from 18 to 48 homes, if that's happening in your zip code, it's suggesting that there's downward price pressure. And so even if the prices are still high, in your view, when you see this spike in inventory, it's good news. It suggests that it's becoming a more buyer-friendly market. Another area in Phoenix I'm starting to have concern about is Scottsdale. And some of these zip codes in Scottsdale, you can see the inventory of homes for sale has almost quadrupled over the last 2 years, now up to the highest level that we've seen in April, at least going back to 2019. And so again, when we see this big surge in inventory combined with a big surge in the days on the market, up to 69 days, the longest duration that homes are sitting on the market going back the last 7 or 8 years, that's a signal in your market that prices are more likely to drop. And I just want to explain for a second for you guys as a buyer or an investor in Phoenix or any other part of America why this is so important. It's because it's taking the guesswork out of buying a house. Like for a lot of people, I think buying a house near the peak of a bubble and then potentially losing lots of money on that house and having your equity wiped away, that's one of the worst nightmare scenarios out there for anyone making any type of financial move, right? and then you have to live in that house and look every day and see that you're underwater, and then if you want to sell it, you can't really sell it. Like, that's a situation no one wants to be in. And so my mission here is to help all of you avoid that situation and to potentially maybe even find areas that are better to buy that you haven't even considered yet. And one way you can do that is by going to www.reventure.app and looking at the home price forecast score for your area in Phoenix or any other city. And you can see it's the areas in blue that have lower home price forecast scores and are more likely to see prices drop, while it's the areas in red that are more stable and more likely to see prices increase. So for instance, near downtown Phoenix, Reventure app is actually saying that this is still a seller's market. We have not really seen a major correction in downtown Phoenix in terms of buyer demand, in terms of inventory. So we're still at a 58 out of 100 on the Reventure app score here in downtown Phoenix, suggesting, that there's still going to be some upward pressure on prices. However, if you go to Scottsdale, if you go to Mesa, if you go to parts of Peoria and Glendale, it's a completely different story. We went from a massive seller's market now to a massive buyer's market, more likely to see prices drop. And in a second, everyone, I'm going to show you how to access this data for yourself so you can make a more informed decision. But before that, I want to just touch upon that point on investors again in Phoenix and kind of the history of Phoenix's housing market. Because if you're buying into Phoenix, you have to understand what you're buying into. You're buying into a market that is extremely volatile, that's extremely prone to being in a bubble, right? Phoenix, it's in a bubble now. It was also in a massive bubble back in the mid-2000s, where we can see in 2006, Phoenix's housing market peaked with a typical home price of $296,000. Well, 6 years later, it was down to $137,000. So home prices in Phoenix collapsed by 54% in that last downturn. And so, it definitely, there's a history here of massive corrections, massive crashes in prices. You can then see the bubble here now in 2022. There's a bit of a correction last year. Prices then kind of bounced back a little bit. However, they're still way higher than their long-term norms suggest. As I said in the beginning of the video, values today are at about a 23% overvaluation rate. So that would be kind of my forecast. Like if we see inventory continue to increase in Phoenix, we see more price cuts, I think at some point we could see prices go down by 23% before we hit some type of stable or equilibrium level in the market that brings buyers back in. And the trouble I see on a lot of these listings in Phoenix is that while the correction has started and it's getting worse, like a lot of the sellers are just so disconnected, right? Like take a look at this, everyone. This is a two-bed townhouse. It's 1,000 square feet on the market for 320 grand. And the owner of this one, they bought it in March 2022 for 265. And then they listed it 2 years later for 330, and they've now started to cut the price. So like the owner of this townhouse, they're still trying to get a $60,000 profit appreciation into a market that's like definitely in a correction and a downturn. And so it's still going to take some time for a lot of owners like this who are disconnected from the market. They don't totally know what's happening. It's going to take some time for them to get with reality, but ultimately, eventually they will. This house has been on the market for 63 days. It's going to continue to sit on the market most likely. And so that's why it's so important to track this data month by month so you can see the trends in the market in real time. So head to www.reventure.app right now and type in Phoenix and immediately start tracking the data in your zip code. Particularly start looking at the inventory in your area and looking at what the inventory trends are. Like if you're in a zip code like this where inventory is just skyrocketing, like it suggests prices are more likely to drop. You should not be in a rush to buy. You're going to see more deals. You're going to see more attractive opportunities. You got to make a decision if you want to buy into a declining market. Conversely, if you're in Paradise Valley, you could see, yeah, the inventory's bounced back, but it's still well below its pre-pandemic levels. So prices are likely to be a bit more stable for now. And the way to put all this together is to access that Reventure app home price forecast score ranked from 0 to 100 for every zip code in Phoenix. I'd recommend you put on the monthly toggle and track this data month by month so you could see how it's trending from a seller's market to a buyer's market and what the recent trends are. All of that data is accessible under a premium monthly plan on Reventure app. The cost is $39 a month, which is ultimately a pretty affordable price compared to the cost of buying a house in Phoenix. The typical cost of buying a house in Phoenix is 450 grand. So having some type of peace of mind on the data and understanding the direction of the market, it's really going to help you as a buyer and investor. So sign up for that monthly pass or do, the annual pass and get a 15% discount on that monthly rate. Head to www.reventure.app right now to make a more informed home buying decision.